Remember those Junior Detective toys and playsets? I've never actually played with them, but I think they were a thing. I know decoder rings were a thing. Wasn't there one in A Christmas Story? Anyway, my point is that detective stories have always been a thing. Mystery as a genre is one of the top-selling genres in the publishing world. Maybe the most top-selling. But the romance genre is always up there with it. People love a good mystery. Some of my favorite shows are those funny mystery shows like Monk and Psych. Burn Notice has some more action in those, and I really like that one too. Mystery is as old as any other genre, with the biggest names in fiction like Sherlock Holmes as characters people immediately think of when they think of mystery. When someone mentions detectives, a number of characters could come to mind, but if you mention detective and comics, there's usually one name that comes to mind: Batman. Batman made his debut in a comic book called Detective Comics. Today, that name is synonymous with the Caped Crusader, but when Detective Comics started, it was literally Detective Comics, characters solving mysteries. Why am I telling you all this? Well, despite how it started, and like I said, Detective Comics is synonymous with Batman, and I recently read Batman Mystery Case Files. This book is promoted as a kid's book, and with great artwork from Chris Uminga, I can see why. These mysteries give the reader a chance to solve them before Batman, but as I read it, they are a little harder than advertised. The concept of the book is actually twofold. On one hand, you've got Batman and the Bat family talking about ways mysteries and crimes can be solved with certain pieces of evidence. We'll get into that in just a minute. But on the other hand, you have the mysteries themselves. Batman, Robin, or Batgirl all face off against Batman's rogues. As a hero outmatches the villain and is just about to tell the criminal how they messed up and inadvertently allowed themselves to be caught, the book pauses and asks the reader if they can solve the mystery. It's a neat concept. It immediately reminded me of those name-your-own-adventure books where you're going to a certain part of the story and the book pauses and lets the reader decide what's the next action to take. In Batman's Mystery Casebook, you're not choosing the adventure, but it gives the reader a fun option to go back over the pages they just read, almost like a detective. You find yourself going back over the panels drawn by Chris Uminga, rereading Sholly Fish's words to see what you might have missed, if the answer wasn't obvious to you already by the time the mystery is ready to be solved. This presents both a fun option, but as I stated in the beginning, a little bit of a problem, especially if this book is meant for only kids. See, the mysteries sometimes rely on the reader knowing more than maybe the average Joe, or they presume a clue shown already is the only option, but kind of contradicts itself when the mystery is solved by naming a clue that Batman already pointed out. Take this for example. This is spoilery for anyone who's going to read this book as far as this specific mystery. Batman and Robin are trying to track down Two-Face. They are given a list of tenants in an apartment building as they search for the villain. Now, maybe I'm a little slow, but I couldn't figure it out. So I read on and I reread the pages, and on the list of clues there was a name, Janice Bartlett. Why? Well, Batman goes on to explain Janice was spelled that way in reference to a Roman figure that looked to the past and the future using two faces. And Bartlett? Well, Batman explains Bartlett is a species of pear, the fruit. But since they're talking about Two-Face, they used pear as in pair, double, referencing Two-Face. See what I mean? Unless you know your species of fruit better than just like Granny Smith apple, and you remember your Roman mythology, I felt like this mystery was a little bit more difficult than the average kid reading the book. That aside, skipping over the artwork by Chris Uminga I think would be an injustice. Uminga has a great playful style for this book. He uses his already well-known style that has a bit of a darker tone to it, and I think it matches quite nicely with the fun mysteries presented in the book. And speaking of those mysteries, Sholly Fish I think does a good job for the most part on what he's written. As I mentioned, I do think some of the mysteries in the book do require the reader to know maybe more, or at least a little bit more, than the average reader. But that aside, it's still a good mystery. And a good mystery can be hard to craft. I think he does a good job presenting multiple mysteries in this book. And if it was just a mystery casebook, I think this would be a fun book for any mystery lover. But the book does something else. I hesitate to call these stories because they're really not. There's something akin to chapter breaks bundled as something like a junior detective quick study. Batman and Friends cover things like fingerprints, DNA, and eyewitness testimony, among other things. explaining to the reader how all of these work for police to help catch criminals. Even though these little side notes in the book aren't stories in the traditional sense, they offer up valuable knowledge, which is why I think this book is perfect for anyone who loves mysteries, and especially for kids who might not only be interested in detective stories, but traditional law enforcement work as well. If you know of a boy or girl who thinks doing something in law enforcement is cool, I definitely suggest this book for them. If you're someone who likes a bit of mystery, trying to solve the whodunit before the hero names them, then this book might be for you too. Batman's Mystery Casebook is filled with fun stories, with the Bat family trying to solve the case while giving the reader the option to do the same.